Well, thank you, Monica,
Yeah,
and
thanks.
good morning. I think hopefully everyone has my screen at this point in time. Um, Thinking about the hot topics, try to appropriately come up with a hot forecast. We'll come closer to that, but I don't know if we could actually call it hot by meteorological standards, but we'll let you make the determination on that. Regardless, it's nice to go first once in a while after playing backup in the order here. So we'll start with the weather today, and I'm going to start with a review as we typically do here. And it was a cooler than normal week here. Probably not a surprise. On the left-hand side here, though, we've got our mean temperature departures for the past week. And you can see in Michigan and much of the upper Midwest, the Corn Belt here, the greens here, all indicating cooler than normal mean temperatures. Michigan generally 1 to as much as 6 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. And that's one of the cooler weeks we've had really all growing season. I'm going to talk about that here in just a moment. In terms of precip, some big changes in some parts of the state. On the right-hand side here, these are observed precipitation totals for the past week, and they range from basically a half to 1 inch over much of northern lower Michigan, portions of eastern upper, to much less than that. And again, if you think back about this, we've been through in many parts of the state a very, very unusually wet period here from late June into July. And last week we saw a break in that, at least in many places. And we had some cases, 5, 6 days of dry weather. And that was the first time we'd seen that much dry weather in some time. Now, putting that into perspective, I talked about the longer term. And I think this is a nice illustration of that. The left-hand side here, these are actual precip totals looking back into the last week of June, so the last 30 days, and I think it tells the story sort of where things are, certainly with regard to moisture in our growing season right now. And much of the yellow areas here, anything more yellow, and basically almost all the state is except for the far northwest, 2 inches or greater. But want to again highlight this area down here along I-94 up into the thumb, the reds and the pink color there, some areas more than 10 inches of rain. And again, if you think about what's average July precipitation in these parts of Michigan, well, maybe 3 1/4. So way, way, way above normal precipitation totals. On the right-hand side here, these are percentiles of normal for almost the same time frame. And again, much of that area you can see more than 200, in some cases, and more than 300% of normal. Contrast that now with the far northwestern edge of the state in western upper Michigan, where we've had significantly less and actually are falling behind normal. But most of the state, as a result of the heavy precip, especially in early July, is well ahead of normal. Wanted to say something about the temperatures too. I mentioned that at the outset. These are daily temperatures at Lansing. I think they're representative, though, of most areas of the state. They go back to the beginning of April here on the left. And the blue bars, the top of that is the observed max, the bottom is the observed min. And you can see really highly variable weather here during most. And then again, we can remember what the spring was like. Big swings up or down, much above normal, some cases a little bit below normal. But especially for much of the early growing season here during the month of May and into June, we were warmer than normal. And the brown area in the middle here, again, this is the climatology. This shows the average. The top of that is the average maximum temperature for the date, and the bottom, the average minimum temperature. And again, what that suggests is that much of the early part of the growing season was warmer than normal. But if we look now here on the far right-hand side, we can see some area, basically in the last week, we have fallen actually a little bit below normal. The other thing to note about the last week to 2 weeks, we've been much closer to the normal. And again, this growing season, we've seen anything but normal, but the last couple of weeks have been very, very unusually close to the climatological normals. I think it's just one of those things. It says something about the timing, but I think overall that's a really positive thing, at least in terms of temperature and in terms of growing conditions for most of our crops. Our degree day totals here, that is not much of a change from what we've seen earlier. The totals here range from a little less than 1,000 in the far northern parts of the state now to about 1,500 in the far south. And maybe more importantly, or more relevant here, if we put that relative to climatology, we're about a little bit behind or a deficit, maybe about 50 units in the far northwestern part of the state where it's been relatively the coolest, to as much as maybe 150 units surplus in the far southeast. And that translates to probably about a calendar week ahead of normal. So if it seems, especially in the south, if it seems advanced, it is. And we've that warmer weather earlier in the season did the job there. There's a reason for that. But we've had that same spatial pattern generally for almost all of the growing season. And as we look at the outlook, we look ahead, probably we'll see that continue. So surpluses, especially in the southern part of the state that we have now, will likely be here with us for the rest of the growing season. One last thing too about the moisture. With all of this moisture, and of course with crops at, or some cases well, certainly some are entering, but many have already entered more sensitive stages, pollination, etc. Soil moisture is a major factor here, and this vegetation drought response index, or veg dry as it's known, I think says tells a pretty good story here. You think back about that precip chart that you just saw. The greens here are all areas where it's more wet, or wetter than normal. The browns, yellows are the opposite. And again, this looks just like that, or very close to that map, the same spatial pattern with some dry soils in far northwest, western upper Michigan, and some very wet soils down across the south central and into east central lower Michigan, where we've got the deep green. So one thing you could also conclude here, obviously, as we go through these sensitive stages, there are those areas, certainly there will not be problems with lack of water for pollination as it is in some years. Especially we look at last year, we went in when we were very dry in the early part of the growing season, much different type circumstances this year. Well, in the forecast here this morning, beautiful conditions for the next few days. High pressure, you can see the center of that high up over northern Wisconsin this morning. That is going to slowly drift the center of that high. It's a Canadian air mass to the east and south here over the next couple of days, but going to lead to another extended stretch of very, well, we'll call it mostly fair, dry conditions. Today will probably be the coolest day of the upcoming week. High temperatures generally in the mid to upper 70s today. And as that high slides off to the east and south, we'll start to get return flow around that. So there will be a warming trend that starts noticeably, certainly by this weekend. I did want to mention, though, one other little odd tidbit here. You may see this, you may not, but tonight and into early tomorrow, there's a chance that we might get some transport of some of the smoke from wildfires in Canada move down into the parts of the Great Lakes, into Michigan. This image here in the lower left, the reds here are high concentrations of smoke. It looks like this one's going to sort of brush us, because most of the smoke from the fires that are still burning in many parts of northern Canada, most of that has remained to our west so far this growing season. But we will here tonight, you might see some of that bronzing or the reddish color of the sunset, because we're not expecting a lot in the way of cloudiness here. So some of that it'll be, I think, temporary though. So we're on the eastern fringe of the area impacted by smoke. It's not like last year, but certainly another taste of that, because there are still fires in progress to our north, actually in the western U.S. as well. By tomorrow morning, high pressure moves right over northern lower Michigan. Gorgeous night tonight, and then morning tomorrow, more fair, dry conditions expected. Our high temperatures will be a couple degrees warmer, though, tomorrow than they are today. As I mentioned, that warming trend starts in earnest. And then by Saturday, again, more of the same, but a little bit warmer. So by the warming trend I mentioned, we should see high temperatures back into the mid and upper 80s, probably by Sunday, and then continue into next week. So that our theme today, the hot topics, I guess it's close. I like to use 90 degrees Fahrenheit as sort of a threshold for that. Using that word, we're not going to probably reach that, but it will be certainly warmer and more humid as we move into the end of the weekend. And so we need to call, I think, also next week very summer-like. With regard to temperatures, it will be above warmer than normal once again. The next chance for precip. You notice I haven't mentioned anything about precip. Well, it's because we don't have really any risk of precipitation here, at least in the short term. But the next chance probably coming late on Sunday with some scattered shower thunderstorm activity late in the day. More likely, though, I think on Monday and Tuesday of next week is when we probably will see the highest threat of the next precip. But it right now not looking like a at least a significant or major type of rainfall producer. If we look at the forecast for the upcoming the entire week, it certainly would be below normal or drier than normal here for, again, the next 7 days. Generally quarter to half-inch amounts over the state, a little bit more than that, possibly in the north. But most of the precip you see here in this particular map would be coming next Monday and Tuesday, possibly more also after that into the middle and latter part of next work week as well. The other message is it's going to be warm again, very summer-like with above normal mean temperatures. I didn't mention min temperatures will be down in the 50s, low and mid 50s, beautiful, really comfortable conditions tonight. That will gradually warm up our lows back into the 60s here by this weekend. So we'll see movement upwards on both the high and the low temperature. Our reference potential evapotranspiration and evaporation estimates here for the upcoming week, a little bit above normal, generally ranging from 0.18 to 0.2 of an inch per day on average here for the upcoming week. Again, that's a little bit above what climatology tells us. These are the 7-day totals here looking through next Wednesday. So again, water demand a little bit greater, or at least the evaporative demand and potential a little bit higher than it typically is for the end of July. And in the medium range and long lead, some I think some significant themes here. In the medium range, the guidance is telling us that the general location of the jet stream across North America, and that's the lower left-hand side here, basically we're going to see that shift towards the north, up into Canada, further north into Canada over the next 1 to 2 weeks. That means one thing for us, and that's warmer temperatures. And so all of our medium range and really the long lead outlooks as well here are suggesting warmer than normal mean temperatures. The upper right, those are the forecasts. This is for the 6 to 10 day. Same is true for the 8 to 14 day time frame, and even beyond that. I'll show you that next. Precipitation, the official forecast actually calls for above normal precip totals. I have not seen evidence of that yet, but we may see a more active storm track across the Midwest here in the middle and latter part of next week. I think that's where that comes from. But let's call it normal to possibly above normal precip totals as we move into the end of July into early August. And then finally, as we look at new long lead outlooks that were issued just this past week by the Climate Prediction Center, both the outlook for the month of August, which is on the top, calling for fairly significant odds of warmer than normal mean temperatures. The seasonal outlook does the same. So August, September, October collectively warmer than normal. And then for precip, no direction, the equal chances category, which basically means there really isn't a firm direction one way or the other. But so I think the take home there is still more warmer than normal. And I talked about the degree day area maps where we have surpluses across most of the state. That is very, very likely to continue, and we'll end up the season with a surplus of heat accumulation as we move towards the end of the season. So summarizing, wrapping things up here, and again, another stretch of beautiful weather, fair, dry, and gradually warmer weather here over the next several days. Probably no rain until the early part of next week. A little bit higher than normal PET for that period. And then as you just saw, the big theme in the medium and long lead still pointing in the warmer than normal. We've seen that consistently for most of the season thus far. That is expected to continue. And with that, I will wrap up and turn it back here to Monica. Thanks.